Yes, everyone, welcome to the IrishHotspur podcast, joined by Flav here, a very special guest, everybody that Dave has lined up for this week. And unfortunately, not the best of circumstances here, Flav and Dave. And we're going to be maybe touching a little bit on the North London Derby, but we're actually going to be touching on much more serious situation, which actually has to do with our manager. It's actually somehow gotten worse after that 2-0 defeat. But Flav, thank you for joining us. Thank you for coming on. How are you
Pleasure.
this morning? I think trying to hang in there, I imagine.
Yeah, I'm all right. I'm kind of, I'm sort of over the North London derby. It, I just kind of reconciled it. I thought, I kind of expected it. Everything that we witnessed was exactly how we predicted it would probably go. So I was kind of
Yeah.
okay after the game. But yeah, there's a wider. It was symptomatic of a wider issue at the club, and
Yeah.
no one can really put their finger on what is wrong, because on paper we have Conte, he's a great manager. Have spent money in the summer. We have a squad of players that are capable of performing better than they did in the North London derby. So why does it all feel like it's doom and gloom? It's kind of difficult to put your finger on it.
We're going to try. We're going to certainly try today and make an attempt at it. That's for sure. Dave, someone who's also going to try to make an attempt at trying to get through maybe all the various things that fans are upset about. And Dave, how are you keeping this morning? Because we do kind of have a big job on our hands to hit this podcast because so many things to get through, really.
Yeah. Look, I'm keeping all right. Spurs sides aside, but look, it's not good times right now as Tottenham fans. I think losing to Arsenal has probably been the catalyst to wake up many fans, myself included, on really what is going on. To have a sense of urgency, of clarity and answers from the board. And look, waking up this morning, seeing Tuchel, Pochettino heavily linked to the manager's job. I think the writing's on the wall. I think we all know what's coming next. But look, Jacko, let's get into it, my man.
Yeah, it's let's get into it. It's pretty amazing that we're bringing you on basically for all the various doom and gloom subjects for this week here at Flap. But any strong takeaways or lessons from the North London Derby? Like I said, I don't want to torture you with thoughts on the game or anything like that. But any sort of like lessons or takeaways from it? For me, it really was just realizing that. I mean, we've been ahead of them 6 years, and I think in a row now in the table. We finished above them 9 years or whatever been since 2015 or something. Since we had lost to them at home. I mean, that was the major takeaway for me. Just it's been a long time since I've been that embarrassed.
Yeah, I think the second half performance saved a lot of embarrassment. I wasn't embarrassed by it, I don't think,
Sure.
but it was tough to take. I mean, I think I've accepted long ago, before 10 games ago, that Arsenal were going to finish above us. And football being the cyclical nature that it is, there will be periods where Arsenal are better than us, and periods where we're better than them. It's not a return to the 90s and 2000s where they were just consistently leagues ahead of us. The gap between the two clubs is almost zero, and I mean that. I don't mean that this season. I mean overall, in terms of what we're capable of doing and spending, should the owners choose to, then there isn't a huge amount of difference between the two clubs. But their owners and chairman behave in a different way to Daniel Levy. So that's the difference. But look, it was poor. The first half was especially poor. My main takeaway was that Arsenal are not as good as I thought they were. First half for 30 minutes, very good, like excellent.
Like we knew they would be in the first 30.
Yeah. Right. And so my takeaway is that this league is really weak. This has the weakest set of teams for a long time, and Arsenal are benefiting from a time where a lot of clubs are in transition. Liverpool, Chelsea, the structure, the spending around Chelsea and what they've done to bring players in was madness, scattergun. There was no strategy at all. But they will come back. But this season, they've been poor. There haven't been any kind of competition. Liverpool have been poor. Man City are not the team of last year. So I think the Arsenal are benefiting from an easier league than normal, and they're not as good as they think they are, but they are better than us. So
That's nice to hear, though, Dave, that they're not as good as they think they are, and perhaps they are being a little bit overhyped and, benefiting from the downfall of all the rest of the teams around them. But what are your strong takeaways, Dave, from this one?
Look, I disagree with yourself and Flav slightly, to be honest with you. I think I come away with it from thinking that Arsenal are probably better than me or what many others probably gave them credit for. I think, look, the first half, they absolutely battered us. I don't get too much wrapped up into this second half performance because the reality is the game was done. They just dropped back every time we got the ball. They didn't press as high as they were. Their job was done. Their job was just about containing us. And I think they done a pretty good job of that in the second half. At the end of the day, I think the difference in the North London derby is the two keepers. Look at Aaron Ramsdale. When we did get on top, he was able to pull off save after save. You look at Hugo Lloris, unfortunately, we've got a keeper in decline. He made an absolute howler for the first goal. Not all his fault. Sessegnon could have done better. Sessegnon should be closing out on the edge of the box rather than letting Saka into the box. And the reason why he doesn't close him down is because he's not confident. So that affects his defensive performance, because if he was, he would have engaged him on the edge of the box rather than let him in the box. But also affects Sessegnon going forward, because before Saka got his goal, Sessegnon had two good opportunities to put the ball into the box and failed on both of them. So I think coming out in the North London derby, I think there's a clear difference between the two squads and the level they're at, and the fact that Arsenal probably have, I would say, plugged a lot of their weaknesses under Arteta, whereas we haven't, Jack.
Yeah, I don't think we have. In fact, I feel like our weaknesses are getting deeper and deeper exposed at the moment. But I don't know. It feels like for me, maybe this was also a big maybe moment for players like Hugo. It's kind of disappointing to see us not really, I don't know, maybe make up for the previous performance, because I don't know, it felt like the last North London derby for me sort of slipped out of our fingers, because we didn't exactly play too well in the beginning of that match either, but we did claw it back. We did find ourselves level at halftime, and we're sort of just undone by, felt like, really major mistakes, individual errors really, from the likes of Hugo. And then we had the Emerson Royale red card. And I felt like this was an excellent opportunity to kind of, let's say, make up for those previous mistakes where it did kind of slip through our hands. But we performed, I thought, even worse than we did actually in the first North London derby, which also was a surprise considering we had players like Kulusevski for this one. We also had a very fit Romero, who's also feeling more confident. It just, I don't know. It was a bit of a surprise for me, but I think we're gonna maybe end the torture there in the North London derby and then get straight into the managerial situation here. Unless, Flav, you have any other maybe kind of strong takeaways or something?
No, I'll happily move on from the North London derby.
Move on there. With the poor run of performances, results, style of play, Spurs fans are turning on Conte, Flav, and questioning whether he is still the right man for Spurs. After this defeat, are you Conte in, Conte out, and where do you stand on this whole managerial situation in general?
My preference would be to stick with him and to just see what happens over the next 3 or 4 years. That would be my preference. I'm sick to the back teeth of restarting. Yeah. Whoever the new manager is, either it's Conte, Tuchel, or Pochettino, we've just got to give him time, and we've got to accept that it might take time to get it right. However, my issue with what Conte's done thus far, certainly we're talking about 18 games is what we're talking about. This is what we defined Conte's time at Spurs, because last season we were absolutely fine, scoring goals for fun. Son and Kane were on fire. Everything looked rosy. You know how the season ended last year. But this season, it's been terrible. The football was. I don't understand this tactic, this obvious tactic of just not playing in the first half. You think of the message that's given to the players, right? Go out there, contain. They're not going out there with a bit between their teeth. They're going out there to contain and sap the energy of the opposition. It's boring. It's dull. It's not what we want from football, and certainly not what we want from Tottenham. So, that said, I've seen Conte teams play very attractive football with the right personnel, and perhaps having a manager like him would force us to spend. But I just want consistency. I want us to
keep our head down with the manager, basically, and just power on.
I just want us to crack on. Why is it not everything is like an emergency that's fixed by sacking managers. And look, there's no good keep sacking managers if Daniel Levy continues to operate the way he does. It doesn't matter who comes in. It doesn't matter unless he begins to speculate significantly, because unfortunately football has become a game where those who spend the most have the best chance of victory. That's obvious. It's always been that way. But we are living in a world where nation states own Premier League football clubs. And if we don't behave in the way they do in the transfer window, we might as well forget any ideas of Premier League trophies. It's just football has become this money-based cesspit. And we're living in it currently. And unless Daniel Levy changes, nothing. It doesn't matter who manages our football club.
Unless he looks outside and sees that it's turning into that, it feels like. But it seems like they just don't really want to accept that it's turned into that sort of environment. I agree with you. I also maybe want to sort of look at it where I saw a lot of screenshots over Twitter, Flav, as well, where it was like they showed some of Arteta's like runs of form where he had exact similar sort of results like over a span of games. And we all know that the Arsenal fans were absolutely all over him. They were screaming Arteta out. They definitely wanted him out for a long time. But their board stuck with him, and their board kept their head down and cracked on, like you said. I mean, is that what they could take? They could learn from that, maybe the Spurs board in this situation.
They have a plan. They had a plan. They knew how they were going to spend it, what the type of player they were going to spend it on, and they trusted their manager. So what is playing out now is correct, and fair play to them. Not as as a Spurs fan, I hate every minute of their success, but they've done it right. And obviously it just shows to show what football fans know about football is nothing compared to people that actually run the game. So, and it's good that we have our opinion, and we should have our opinion, but the fact that you'd say 90% of the Arsenal fan base, when they hadn't won in 10 games, lost the first 3 games, they all wanted him out.
Yeah, absolutely. Dave, I mean, it's tough because the Conte and Conte out has gotten even more serious, and we find ourselves really very much at a crossroads where after this North London derby defeat, there has been a lot of criticism laid at his doorstep. Where do you stand on Conte? I mean, yes, he's getting maybe some things wrong, but have you maybe started to give up on him, start to question him more? Or do you think it's maybe best to just keep on and stick with him here?
No, look, I've stated this before. I refuse to keep throwing managers under the bus when Daniel Levy and the board operating in the way they do. I mean, you look at Arsenal reaping the benefits of the rewards from sticking with Arteta, backing him. You look at Liverpool with Jurgen Klopp when they brought him in here first. Continue to back him even after Champions League final. When they lost, they continued to back him, and they went on to win every club in English football, or in world football. Sorry. You look at Man City being backing Guardiola time after time after time again. I'm not saying we have that sort of money as Guardiola at City, but the proof is in the pudding that if you sit there and you back a manager properly, that there are rewards that come with it. But we don't seem to want to do that. We every 16 to 18 months, we're always sitting here continuously talking about a new manager, and it's just got to the point where it's like, when do we stop talking about the managers, and then when do we actually look for the board to start operating in a different way? Because the way we're operating now is the way Chelsea was sort of operating under Abramovich, hiring and firing managers, except we don't have that money to fund it the way Abramovich did at Chelsea. If you look at it, like we've got Jose, we've got Conte, Tuchel is rumoured, and we're going down that route of the way Chelsea were under Abramovich, but without the money to finance it. Now, with the reports that are coming out right now, I think we'll all agree the writing's on the wall. You look at the stuff that Antonio Conte is saying, look at the reports coming out about, the split in the hierarchy. They don't know what they want to do, whether they want to back Conte, whether they want to bring in another guy, which has a knock-on effect in the transfer window. But all this has to stop. At the end of the day, Jack, for me, when the club is a mess and in turmoil, which we find ourselves in this January transfer window, the answer is not continuing to repeat the same mistakes and making a change in the dugout. The answer is stability in the dugout, and look at your own mistakes that you make and then change them mistakes. For me, I just want to break down quickly, what I think is Conte's fault and what I think is on the club. And I think if I do that, I'll come out with a clear answer for me, and hopefully other people are the same. But when you look at Hugo Lloris, Jack, signed a 2-year contract extension last January at the right old age of 35 because his contract was up last summer. Now, we all knew he was getting on an age that we needed a longer term, number one, that the decline was going to happen, that we'd have to replace him. So, but what we done is when you go to re-sign that new contract extension, he also said he wanted to help identify his successor, bring him in here and work with him, the guy that had taken over his role for the next 10 years. But we haven't done that yet.
2 temporary keepers we brought in instead,
Yeah.
Dave, I believe, in Golini and Forster instead. Yeah.
Exactly. The 2 temporary options brought in, it's kind of like, the decline of Hugo Lloris, that's not on Antonio Conte. That's on the club and not having the foresight to recognise it and get that goalkeeper in here quicker. You go into the right wing back. It's been a long outstanding issue since we saw Kyle Walker underneath Pochettino.
Yeah, it's a graveyard of failed transfers.
Every signing in that position has since been getting progressively worse. That's a failure on the club. That's not a failure on Antonio Conte. He's being let down by the options we have right now. You go into centre-back since Toby and Jan have been sold on. We've had a real issue in that problem, Jack, going on for 3 years now, which we've been so poor defensively since they've gone. But what have we done as a solution to the problem? We had Stavison Sanchez, who we still have at the club, despite him not being able to nail down a starting centre-back position under any of the managers we've had, which is not good enough. You've got Eric Dyer, who's been converted from a CDM to a centre-back. You've got Ben Davies being converted from a left-back to a left-sided centre-back. Then we went in and brought Joe Rodon in under Jose Mourinho. Then you got in Romero, which you would say is an absolute class signing. But the only one we brought in on the long lay to address the issues that were here before him, or under Conte to address the issues that were here before him, is bringing Longley in on loan. We haven't spent nearly enough investment on that position over the last 3 years, despite us knowing under multiple managers that we have a real issue there, that we're conceding goals left, right, and centre, and a lot more than what we were.
And also, it just hasn't been shaken up ever. It's even just things sometimes need to shake up, Dave. You need to sometimes go into the corners of the apartment, dust things down a little bit, make sure you haven't missed any cobwebs. And it feels like the defense, the back line has been that, where they just have consistently forgotten about maybe upgrading it or, taking a look at it. Like Romero was a godsend for us, that season, because he just proved how much, better we should be looking for when it comes to that position.
The only answer to the solution we've had is spending money on Romero and bringing in Langley on loan and converting other players. It's what is it? Square pegs in round holes. You know what I mean? It's just it's not good enough. And then people think the answer is going to a back four. We're very quick to forget how crap Dyer and Sanchez were in a back four, trying to play Davies in there. Langley and Romero as a partnership is not the answer. It just isn't. But did we ever consider that the reason why we brought Antonio Conte in here in the first place was because we knew he played a back five. The board knew there was problems with the back line, and that we brought in Conte that plays back five because they were in the hope that he would be able to get a bit more of a cohesive unit together. In fact, I'm quite frankly embarrassed that we've brought in 3 defensive managers since Pochettino, and none of them have been able to make that defence work. But instead of going out and spending big money on it and addressing the issue, we keep ironing and firing managers to try
and make them work with the same set of defenders that the previous one had as well. Yeah. Sorry, you were going to come in there, Flav? Yeah.
There was a lot, and I agreed with everything pretty much. The defense, the glaring failures and frailty of that defense doesn't seem to be addressed at all. Like, as you said, Sanchez, Dyer, Tanganga and Ben Davies have been at the club for 4 or 5 years. And under Jose Mourinho, I remember a game we played against Newcastle. I've said this on the Fighting Cock, but the game we played against Newcastle, we had a back three of Sanchez, Dyer and Tanganga. And you're looking at it and you're thinking, I hope I never see that ever again. Against Palace, all 3 of those players played. I know we won the game, but they all 3 played. And you're just thinking, or was it Palace? No, Villa, I think, or whoever it was, right? They played, and it was just, I'm like, what? And it's not like we haven't spent money. It's just we spent money on strengthening areas we've spent. So all I keep going back to is Lo Celso and Ndombele and the amount of money we lost there. That's close to £90 million. Crazy money. And there is an accusation about Daniel Levy that he doesn't spend enough money. We have started spending, to be fair. It's just the vast majority of our transfers, or certainly the big ones, have been a bit of a money pit. And but that's not to say this doesn't have to be addressed, because it's all well and good having Kane and Son bail you out for 3 seasons when you've got a defence that's as weak as ours. Our defence, take out Romero, and Romero actually is escaping a lot of criticism. A lot of Spurs fans, myself included, haven't really picked on some of his performances that have been average this season, to be honest, and didn't play for a month before the World Cup and played practically every minute there. That's outrageous, in my opinion. He may have been injured, but to be suddenly 100% fit for the entire World Cup, having not played a month beforehand, I think that's the questions need to be asked about that. But also, if you take Romero out of that team, that defense is probably the worst in the top 10.
Because he's classes above them. Like, even if like you said, he's had average performances, we've seen levels from Romero that we know we'll never see from Sanchez and Dyer.
He's twice the defender the rest of them are. Yeah, for sure.
And another thing, though, would you say the squad reflects the chopping and changing of managers, though, lads? Like, it reflects the fact that since we've gone through so many restarts, we've gone through so many rebuilds, that we actually haven't ever completed a rebuild. So we actually have players from previous manager, kind of tenures and everything. And it's all just kind of gotten like backlogged, it feels like, with the squad. And you can see it kind of reflected with some of the players, like you mentioned, that have been here 4 or 5 plus years that we were complaining about being here 5 years ago. I mean, Ben Davies is near a testimonial at this stage, and it's one of the most underwhelming testimonials, bless his heart, I must say, like for a Spurs player. And I don't know, it just seems like there's been a backlog of rebuilds, basically, where we've never actually gone through a rebuild before, and we keep redoing them, and the squad seems to reflect that, at least to me.
I think it has improved under Paratici. I would say there has been there's a strategy to what we're doing under Paratici, and we were clearly interested in all 3 of those Inter Milan centre backs. But
we're the Paratici twins over here, so we definitely agree with that. We're big fans of his.
Yeah. I mean, he's you look at him and you think this guy's a class act. He knows what he's doing. Daniel Levy should have handed over the football dealings a long time ago, but it took him. So it probably was the Lo Celso and Ndombele signings that he thought, fuck, I don't really know what I'm doing here.
Yeah, in fact, it was Steve Hitchen that we sort of think a lot of that money was wasted, even though Daniel Levy doesn't cough up a lot of money. A lot of the money that he did cough up was definitely heavily wasted by the likes of Steve.
But he brought Hitchen into the club. Before him, he brought is it Mitchell? I can't remember his name. The guy from Southampton.
Yeah, and he fell out with him.
Yeah. Look, that fundamentally, consistently, the failing has existed at this football club, and I'm saying this with this caveat that I think Daniel Levy overall has done an incredible job as chairman of Tottenham. I think from where we were to where we are now, his tenureship generally could be considered as a huge success. We're a different football club completely to the one I grew up watching. We exist on a different plane now. We haven't got any trophies, but potential. There was a time where a manager as good as Conte, Mourinho, and Tuchel wouldn't even sniff at Spurs, and now we've got a choice between Pochettino and Tuchel. Spurs are a huge, massive football club, and Daniel Levy has a huge part to play in that. But the footballing decisions that he's made and the people that he's chose to bring into the club, the buck stops with Daniel Levy. He's leading the club, and then anyone who brings in, whether if they're a failure, it's his responsibility, and if it's a success, he can claim it. But I do feel like we're at the end of the road for him as well. But
yeah, I think he's definitely probably pushed the boat as far as he probably can, or pushed the wheel as far as he can. Dave, I feel like maybe I'll come to you first on this one. We've reached that fork in the road, and this kind of maybe ties into Daniel Levy and Conte and everything. Antonio Conte isn't making his commitment to Spurs because he doesn't feel like he's going to be properly backed if he does, and he doesn't have any sort of inclinations that he will be backed in the way that he wants at Spurs. Daniel Levy isn't keen to give Conte a new contract because and back Conte, because Conte isn't really exactly making his inclinations very clear, isn't exactly making his commitment very clear. So we're sort of at this kind of stall, or kind of this, I don't know, this bit of a purgatory situation for Spurs fans, where we're kind of waiting for either of them to move, either of them to budge. I mean, who's to blame for this standoff, do you think, Dave? Antonio Conte or Daniel Levy?
Look, it's completely Daniel Levy and the Tottenham ownership, Jack. You can't blame Conte for this standoff whatsoever. At the end of the day, the board need to remember why they got Antonio Conte in here in the first place, was to appease the fans, to stop them from going absolutely ballistic. Under Nuno when he got sacked against United, every fan sat there and said, we're fed up with this shit. Go and bring someone like Antonio Conte in. It shows ambition. Well, they've done that. But we find ourselves 17 days into a transfer window without having operated in it or participated in it. And the excuses we're given is because there's a split up in the hierarchy, and they're not sure whether they want to stick and back Conte or get rid of him and bring in the next guy, And it has a knock-on effect to the transfer window, and the situation we find ourselves in now could very easily be cleared up by the board coming out and taking ownership, which is what Antonio Conte is also looking for with his quotes, and just basically letting everybody know what's going on, but also just saying, look, Conte is our guy. We're going to keep him here, and we're going to back him this January. But every transfer window, we seem to find ourselves with some sort of reason why we haven't brought in players yet, or why we're still the last ones in the market to sort of get going and operate and put an end to sort of, or help out with the crisis we're in. But for me, it's a manufactured crisis from up above, Jack. We don't have to be in this situation right now. It's simple. They give Conte the assurances that he wants, that he's going to be back, so that he can sign a new contract, so that we can bring in players for him, but also we can potentially try and, keep Harry Kane, which reports coming out yesterday saying he's not looking at negotiating a new contract. And Paulo keeps saying that we should accept that Harry Kane might not be here beyond the end of the season. It's an absolute joke. The upstairs have to come out and lay down the money. This is the big problem. They brought in Jose Mourinho, didn't back him fully. He ended up carrying the can and going. Brought in Nuno. They weren't happy with him quickly on. And now they're sitting there saying, oh, well, we're not sure whether Antonio Conte is worth the money. Well, then who is? Who is? You sacked Pochettino that brought us to a Champions League final. You sacked Jose Mourinho on the remit he wasn't going to make top four. You done the same with Nuno. Conte comes in, performs a miracle, gets top four. And now all of a sudden they want to pull the plug, a year, 12, 13, 14 months into the project. It's not good enough. Like, when you look at what's on the football pitch, the reason why we're seeing the inconsistencies we are, and any manager that walks in here and their formations and their tactics and stuff aren't working, even though it's brought them success at previous clubs, is because we will not accept that the quality on the pitch is not good enough, and especially in key areas like goalkeeper, centre-back, centre midfield, the spine of your team. It's just not good enough to do what these sort of managers want to do. What's the point of bringing in someone like Antonio Conte? And we brought him in here because of his CV, right? Because he's winning trophies. What's the point of bringing him in here, selling us the dream as fans, and then just not delivering, not backing him? Because you know what's going to happen? He's going to leave Tottenham. He's going to go somewhere else, and he'll go on to win trophies. At Tottenham, the board have a way of making the likes of these managers look bad. Under Pochettino, after Champions League final, called for a painful rebuild. Didn't want to do it. Jose Mourinho, he's won everything there is to win in the game. By the time he leaves Tottenham, he's made look outdated, dinosaur, doesn't know what he's doing. But guess what? He left and won a Europa Conference League with Roma, where we're dumped out. Now you've got Conte. We're here again. He's clueless. He doesn't know what he's doing, tactics, this, that, and the other. When are we just going to look at it and say, okay, we've neglected that playing squad for years, and we're going to heavily invest in it to give any manager that's in the dugout a chance? Because even if you sack Conte, we're going to be here in the next 16 to 18 months again, same repeat, rinse the conversation again. And the only ones that can stop it and have the power to stop it is the people up above, by putting in serious investment under one manager. What's the point of finding 150 million last summer, putting it in, knowing that there is still going to be holes to fill, that the squad is still going to be nowhere near the level and it's good level that we need it to be at, and it's going to take continued investment. Now we find ourselves in January, 17 days into the window, and they're not sure whether they want to back him. It's been manufactured by the board and Daniel Levy, it's the reason why we find ourselves in the situation we do is because the playing squad has been heavily neglected over the years. They've been bringing in these big sort of managers, hoping that their managerial experience will be able to cover up the mismanagement of the club on a number of years. Like, we were going in the right direction up until the Champions League final. Since then, there's been no real vision. It's been a mixed match of plans. It's a mixed match of squad. You've got a squad that resembles 4 different regimes, players from Poch, Mourinho, Nuno, and now Conte. That shows on the football pitch, but yet we're always going to sit here and let the manager take blame. Well, one good thing about Antonio Conte, he is exposing the board, and they need to be exposed. And look, it's up to them to come out and show the leadership. But again, are we surprised that the board aren't coming out and answering the questions that the trust put to them? Of course we're not. Of course we're not, because at the end of the day, the questions that the board, the supporters trust put to the Tottenham hierarchy, why are they delaying the answers? Because they don't have the answers. They don't know what they want to do. They don't know what the plan, what the vision is, because they don't even know if they want to stick to Conte. It's an absolute joke.
Yeah, Flav, I mean, who do you sympathize with here? Do you sympathize with Conte, or do you understand maybe the board's hesitance to invest heavily in the squad if they don't know if he's actually going to stay?
Yeah, I think Conte is partly responsible. I think it's difficult to plan for the future, and your manager, you don't know who's going to be here in 4 months. He might want them to spend £100 million on 2 new defenders, which they 100% need to do. But if you can't trust that he's going to be there to implement this plan that you build together, then yeah, he is partly responsible for this situation. But he obviously knows that his view for success, which the blueprint that he's created, he's used in previous jobs, is just to spend lots of money on quality players, which is lovely and amazing, and we all hope that happens. But it's like what happens, I guess, if we do spend players on these managers, spend this money on these players, and the next manager doesn't rate them. There isn't an endless supply of money to keep buying players that don't work.
That's a mistake we've made in the past too.
Yeah, we've been impacted by it, but we've still got tons of money to spend in terms of what we are able to spend to be compliant with FFP. It's something like £400 million that we could spend in the transfer market, and that's like asking ENIC to do it. It's never going to happen. We're in this situation because of Daniel Levy and ENIC and the way they operate, and the fact that what drives them isn't glory on the pitch. Clearly, it's systematically good business in terms of profit, and creating something that is valuable for the eventual sale of the club. I did like, if you remove the ethical angle just for a second. Imagine it isn't Qatari money and it is American money. Not that any billionaire gets to a point without doing some sort of unethical practices to get that rich. But say that there was an investment from America and they purchased 29.3% of the club, and they knew that their reasoning for buying a club wasn't about making money; it was about creating a greater brand or whatever it might be. Then that's potentially where the money can come from. So Daniel Levy can remain in control of the football club. ENIC is the majority shareholder. You've got new investment who has a different motive than ENIC and reasoning for running a football club. And then we might be in a position where we can start operating like Chelsea and Arsenal. And imagine Paratici with Chelsea's money, what we would be. But this is what a fan wants, and Daniel Levy isn't a fan of Tottenham, not in the way we are anyway. So I don't know. It needs that in order for us to change. We need new ownership fundamentally, and that's a shame. That's a shame because there's potential to do it right now, and it's not happening.
It's a bit of a standoff between, I think, the two. And basically, you're just asking for one to move first or asking for one to budge first. And it sort of feels like it has to be Daniel Levy this time to budge first after what's happened with all the previous managers. And we know also that Antonio Conte isn't exactly a yes man. So he's not really going to budge first usually in these situations.
Conte should have done a better job with the players he has. He can't escape blame either. We are not playing good enough for the quality we have in that team. The massive issue with the defense, but we should be better than what he has delivered. So he needs to take responsibility for that, and I think he has as well. He has actually come out and said, "Look, there are things that I'm not doing right, and maybe I'm not good enough to be in this job, or whatever it might be." Maybe that's the subtext is another dig at Daniel Levy. But yeah, Daniel Levy brought him in. It's his responsibility, right, to not be in a standoff with the manager. Nothing healthy can come from this. If we've got the manager and a chairman, butting heads, they need to work cohesively together. And the difference now is there is this groundswell of significant opinion against Daniel Levy and ENIC. You're hearing chants in the ground pretty much for the first time, where thousands of fans are screaming, "Daniel Levy, get out of our club." That isn't a situation that he's been in before. There's always been dissenting voices, but ENIC out was a small group who were vocal on Twitter and whatnot, but it never really reached the stands. Now it has, and that's a difficult position for him to be in because he won't want to be chastised every single game and live and work in that atmosphere, and he'll become quite resentful, I think, as well. So it's not a great position, but he needs to be put in this position in order to act accordingly.
Yeah,
but
absolutely right.
Well, we find ourselves in a position as a football club where our managers are coming in with more ambitions than what our owners are. Look, if you look at the business model that they operate under, it's what's brought us the stadium and the training complex. Great, but with that became a promise of going to the next level and bringing silverware with that. We're a lot further off silverware now in this new stadium than what we were under at White Hart Lane, and this is where the problem is come in with the board. For me, look, I just, like I said, I think up until the Champions League final, this club was going in the right direction, but since then there's been a systematic catalogue of errors and failures which has stopped us from really pushing on and progressing. They haven't gone and invested in the squad the way they need to, which is why people then question the likes of a Mourinho and a Conte, which is wrong. They're being questioned because the downfalls of our recruitment and our squad. Why has our recruitment been piss poor? Because our scouting department was nowhere near up to scratch. That's all on the board. That's all overlooks by them, and they've brought in the likes of a Jose and a Conte to try and cover up these mistakes. But all it's done is kick the can down the road, and it's we're now at a point where these top managers, elite managers, are coming in here. They can't do anything with what we've got, and the board don't look like they want to do anything quick enough to be able to sort the problem out to give these managers a chance. So then you're left with the question: How much of a hunger and an appetite does this board have to take this club to the next level, to be able to win trophies, which is what fans want? We were patient enough to go 3 months underneath Pochettino without signings because we understood the finances for the stadium. But then that, like I said, that was built to bring us to the next level, to trophies. We're not sitting there, you're paying big money. No one's sitting there enjoying the football, watching what's going on the last 3-4 years. And it's all on the board. Now we're sitting in a situation, who's to blame for the standoff? It's the board. It can't, look, yes, Antonio Conte, you can question, you should have got a bit more out, maybe some of the summer signings, this, that, and the other. But ultimately, where our failings are in the squad have been here long before Antonio Conte even got here, before he signed that contract. So we can't even put this on Antonio Conte. We've got to be careful with this as well. You can't really keep looking at the manager all the time. Sometimes you've just got to look at the board and ask yourself, have they delivered on their promises? Well, they just haven't.
But you've got clubs with lesser players and reportedly lesser managers playing better football. Look what Brighton are doing. Like, they're killing teams, and you would only take a couple players out of Brighton and get them into Spurs team. I get what you're saying. Look, fundamentally, the problem isn't what Conte's done with this team. Fundamentally, is the overall leadership of the club. That's why we find ourselves in this situation. But we should be playing better football than we are, even if you're losing a bit more. Do you know what I mean? It's something to be proud of.
Do you know what it is, though, Flav? Just for me, quickly. Sorry, Jacko. it's kind of like this has been with some of these core group of players that have been here. We've seen this time and time again. After Champions League, what was it, 12 games into the next season, rumours were coming out, all players are unhappy with Poch, with his methods, this, that, and the other. Then you go to Jose Mourinho, all the players are unhappy because he's being mean to them. He basically tells them they're not good enough. They can't accept that. You see the same under Nuno. They were complaining that he gave him a cold shoulder. With Jose and Nuno, they complained that the fitness levels weren't up to scratch. I mean, you're professional footballers with all the equipment around you and nowadays that you need. If a manager leaves the onus on you to go and do the work, then Conte comes in, he does well, and now we've all of a sudden performances drop off a cliff from what they were at last season. And this is the same pattern I've seen happen since Pochettino, and this can't keep continuing to happen.
Do you know what's going to happen now? We're going to go and beat City, aren't we?
That was going to be the ending question. Yeah, just as the send off. Would it be so Spursy just to beat City after all of this? I've gotten your answer there. I was going to actually give a quick tangent of a question actually to Flav, because I've heard you mention how like certain players, right, have kind of lost form and we're not playing nearly as well as we did last season under Conte. Do you feel like maybe is a bit of a, don't fix what ain't broke, sort of situation. And maybe he did kind of break what was already kind of perfect at Spurs. It feels like the Sonny and Kane relationship isn't the same. Basuma came in here, isn't the same player. Kind of those sort of situations and those sort of examples of like maybe players that have fallen off somehow. Maybe he kind of tweaked things and maybe it's all broken now.
Yeah, no, I don't think he broke. I don't think he broke it. I think like what Dave's saying about like you're relying on players that have been there a long, long time, who've heard all of these messages, worked under all these managers, like certainly defence, and haven't really been up to scratch. We've relied heavily on Kane and Son's relationship. Mm-hmm. So what was different last year is that Kane and Son were on fire. Absolutely, Kane's been absolutely fine. Like he's playing some of the best football, and he's prolific this season. Unreal, right? But Son's form has literally fallen off a cliff. And maybe it is form, or maybe time's catching up with him. All players age differently. Whatever it is, this is the worst patch he's had at Tottenham pretty much since he first joined. So Conte lost that amazing dynamic between these two players. Conte also lost having consistently both Bentancur and Kulusevski in the team. Those four players are our most important attacking outlet. And if they're not playing together, then we are significantly hindered. Kulusevski missed half the games this season, maybe a couple more than that. Bentancur's been out, like we said, since the World Cup. And before that, he was playing excellent football, and he was one of the best midfielders at the World Cup. So we know how good he is. So he's been unlucky with that as well. But you got to make it work. You have to.
I think he's paid the big bucks.
The thing is, Flav, do you believe it will work under any manager until some of these things are sorted out? Because I know we all sit here and we say, a manager's got to come in, he's got to make it work. But when do we stop just like accepting that a manager has to come in here and work with what he's got? Because then it also goes back to the board, because it's like, if that's the sort of manager you want, bring in a project manager where he's not going to demand 60, 70, 80 million pound players every single window, and that he is more than happy to work what he's got, that he can work with cheaper signings. That's then on the board for bringing in someone like an Antonio Conte. Then you can't bring you don't bring in Antonio Conte and Jose Mourinho and go, okay, well, we don't win trophies at Tottenham, but you have to make it work. Rather than going, okay, what do you need to win trophies? And then bringing it in.
What do you think he asked for that he didn't get, though? Because we did spend a lot in the summer. We spent £50 million on a backup a squad player, which isn't really Daniel Levy behaviour. But in comparison to what other clubs are doing, it still wasn't enough. It was those centre backs, wasn't it? Surely that it was the centre back, and that's a massive failing.
This is a problem with me. I've been calling this out for a long time now, for a number of years, about this centre-back position. It's absolutely costly, but we still persist with a lot of these same guys, even though we keep getting the same answers, the same results on the football pitch. We're still leaking more goals than what we ever did under a Toby and a Jan. And it's kind of like when you go back to Poch's squad, you look at you know, the level we need to be at and the sort of squad we need to have to be able to go and compete. And we're just far away from it. I was no one in the club looked at our defensive situation, compared it to Tilby and Jan, one of the best partnerships I've ever seen, and say, okay, we need to get back to that level. You even look in midfield, you've got Rodrigo, Bentancur, and Højbjerg. Look, I like them. I think, okay, they put it all in for the badge. But in realistic terms, it's like drinking little Coke with them compared to having real Coke under Wanyama and Moussa Dembele. You know, there's levels to this. And the board, you look at right back, it's been a problem. Left back, look, Perisic, Doji coming in, I'm happy. Then you even go into the forward areas. Yeah, they spent 50, 60 million on a backup player, Managerial. But that's a long neglected problem. And it's kind of like, if they would have done that before, instead of bringing in Carlos Vinicius on loan, if they would have done the striker thing before, then that's one less position that we have to fill out this season, which means you would have got in a centre-back by now, that right wing-back that Conte needs to be able to help the team to bring it forward.
Not happy, Dave, are you? Not happy at all.
Do you know what it is, Flav? I just like winning. I can't take losing, but
I love it too. I love it.
The last 3 or 4 years have been the hardest time supporting Tottenham Hotspur, and it just feels like it's a constant drag. It feels like coming out of every transfer window.
It hasn't been fun, has it?
No, you're never 100%. You're never 100% looking at it and go, right, all plugs are filled. Let's go in and give it a good fucking hoolie this season. We can never, ever do that because we're always left short because the board don't want to do things quick enough. And even when they have tried to do things, it's been mishit after mishit after mishit in the transfer window until someone like Paratici got here. So under Steve Hitchen, they pissed about with £350 million. That could have gone a long way to fixing the issues, to give us some sort of decent squad. That when Conte or a manager like Conte comes in here, it's like, right, I just need a centre-back, right wing back, bring them in, we're ready to go. But we're never ready to go. And this is the problem. I get to the point where I'm just fed up with having to be do all the time. I'm fed up with square pegs in round holes, you know. And look, I get as pumped up as anybody. I'm as guilty as anybody for getting behind the boys on match day and always believing we can win. But after the Arsenal game, I've also had to accept the reality I don't want to accept. You know, we Antonio Conte came in, kept us ahead of them, you know. But somewhere along the lines, it's fallen off. And the reason why is because years of mismanagement and squad neglect has caught up with them. It's that simple. It's got to a point now where it's been exposed and it's been caught up, and it's kind of like, I'm just fed up with it, Flav. I just want one season of stability, you know, of having all the pieces of the puzzle to see where we can go, you know, especially under someone like Conte.
We want what Arsenal are having currently. That's what, and that's absolutely the fact. There's very little difference in the size of the clubs in terms of revenue and turnover. We could have that if the spending was correct and the vision was correct, and we don't, and that is at Daniel Levy's door for sure.
I think it's also the fact that we did have such a beautiful last, ending of the season, and it was fairy tale-ish, and they even made, their own little documentary about it and everything with Conte, and we were so excited about this season, and felt like we were going to enter a bit of a honeymoon period for maybe a little bit, but of course it was cut short, maybe in true Spurs fashion, very short-lived for us. I kind of maybe want to get your sort of thoughts on the news of today, Pochettino, and we'll kind of, slowly kind of wind this up or sort of kind of, end it off maybe a little bit after this here, Flav, and make use of your time. Pochettino and Tuchel are your two choices in case Antonio Conte is to leave. Any preference between the two? I know you referenced earlier that you're tired of these rebuilds, so it is.
Yeah, but if he's going, isn't it? Look, fundamentally, it doesn't matter who it is if we don't change the way we apply ourselves. But we've kind of talked about that a lot. So I would say Pochettino back just because that the feel-good factor of having him back, and maybe he could rebuild. No, you do look at our fullbacks with the young kid from Udinese coming in. I always mispronounce his name, which is why I've said that. And Spence as well. Yeah, I think like what he could do with those two young wing backs, what he did with Walker and Rose. Remember, everyone will remember that Rose was an absolute joke before Pochettino turned up. Like he signed a new contract, and the reaction to his new 5-year deal was It was horrendous. It was over the top because he wasn't as bad as people were saying. And he turned him into an international centre-back. Left back. And one of the key leaders in the dressing room as well.
Yeah.
And I'm saying Pochettino because he's Spurs, fundamentally.
He understands Spurs, and he understands Levy. To be fair, more than others do. Yeah,
they had a good relationship, and I think even if we're not going to spend like Arsenal have spent and Chelsea have spent, we are spending more than when we had Pochettino the first time because we don't have the obligation of the stadium and Wembley and all that shit. But so my heart says Pochettino. Tuchel is an excellent manager as well, and the fact that the choice between these two shows just how attractive this Tottenham Hotspur job is. Tuchel's come out and it's been really kind of quite surprising. Like it seems like his name came out and sort of nowhere, and it's almost like he's trying to talk himself into the job. And he's talked so fondly about Spurs in the past, about him being a kid and when he used to play football with his family or with friends, he would always imagine that he was playing for Tottenham Hotspur because he loved the name. You hear that shit a lot. It doesn't mean anything, right? But it's nice that, on some level that he thinks fondly about the football club. The fact that he's linked to Chelsea is irrelevant because so was Conte. Either is fine. As long as I don't even think we need that much, really. I think we need 2 centre-backs and an attacking midfielder to challenge for the league. And maybe a right wing-back.
Yeah.
That's not a goalkeeper there as well.
Oh, fuck yeah. And definitely need a goalkeeper as well. Shit. It's quite a lot. That's half a team. We need half a team. We need about £250 million to make us into a title challenger. And that's not outrageous, given the fact that Chelsea have literally just spent fucking God knows that 240 million in the summer. They just spent 60 million plus 25 million in add-ons for Mudryk. And it's like we're available to do that. It's just I don't know. I'm not going to go back to Daniel Levy again. But
I was going to say if we're condemned to play within our means, Pochettino knows how to play within his means. He knows how to work with the cards that he's dealt. He's not exactly. He's the opposite of maybe a budget or whatever, a checkbook manager. And so if we're forced to kind of play within those rules, within those constraints and everything, he's a guy who kind of knows how to do well.
Yeah, if we have to wait for a new owner in order for us to change the way we operate, then Pochettino is a good manager to have in that interim period.
I agree.
Because he'll get the most out of it. The fact is that even if there is some people interested in buying Tottenham, it's going to be a long, drawn-out process. You imagine how tight Daniel Levy is with the club's money when buying players. Imagine what it's going to be like when it's his own money that he's going to get out of the club. He's going to be a nightmare. And he's going to be very, very rich. The club's valued at around 3.5 billion. And if people overpay like they did at Chelsea, 4.5 billion, which is why Manchester United and Liverpool are up for sale currently, is they're thinking if that's the market rate at the moment, if massively inflated, then we should sell and get out now to maximize our profits. Spurs, if Spurs are sold, and it much more likely to be the way that ENIC took over Tottenham. And I don't know if you know this, but when they become a minority shareholder in 2001, and it took them 5 years to become the controlling aspect in 2006, of which you can directly correlate the rise of Tottenham Hotspur from that point to what we are now. So it might take a long time, but and having the manager who can deal with that and get the most, then Pochettino's the guy, because you think he feels like his stock's fallen somewhat from leaving Spurs because it was quite a poor period at the end, but we should have just stuck with him in hindsight. And then he went to PSG, which is a mental job. It's just a crazy, weird job, and you're not really operating. And that's it. That's all he's done. So
now he's just been playing golf with Mickey Hazard, and
and his son's still here. I think his son's still in the youth academy. He might have moved on, but he certainly was last season.
Watford, is he not? The son.
Has he gone? Is he?
I think so.
And it's interesting to me that he could have gone. Any club would want Pochettino. Almost any. PSG wanted him, right? So there are so many opportunities for him to join clubs, and he hasn't. It does feel a little bit like he's waiting. Just waiting for the opportunity.
That being said, I'm kind of leaning towards Tuchel, Dave, because I am a fan of some of the German coaches, and also because we already have this 3-4-3, 3-5-2 kind of thing. I feel like we're already looking at all these wing backs and back three specialized center backs. maybe Tuchel kind of would be the guy. And he also maybe, let's say, has a bit more of a push perhaps on Levy than Pochettino would be. Maybe he'd be slightly less of a yes man, but also maybe a bit more kind of a charismatic than Conte would be, I would imagine, and Thomas Tuchel. But I don't know, Dave, like, where do you stand on it? Because I agree with everything that was said about Pochettino, and it sort of makes sense that if you can't really get rid of the owners at the time being, he's kind of a guy that knows how to punch above his weight and play within his means. Thomas Tuchel, we're probably not sure on that, and so it might be a safer option, Pochettino.
Look, me personally, look, like I said, I think the writing's on the wall. I think we will be looking for a new manager as well as players in the middle, come the end of the January transfer window. I think a defeat against City on Thursday night could probably be the final writing on the wall. But for me, I think it's disgraceful having two guys linked to a job right now. At the end of the day, they're going to come in here. The whole piece by them sacking Conte and bringing one of these guys in is that they'll be able to get more out of what we've currently got. But we're going to still be here in 16 to 18 months' time. If they still don't, invest in certain positions under these managers are going to be in the same position as Conte's in now, as Jose Mourinho in, as Nuno, as Pochettino was in after Champions League final. And it's just an admission that they don't want to go and spend that big, massive amounts of money. What they're hoping by doing is firing and bringing in another manager, is that the next manager can hopefully get a Sanchez or a Dyer going or an Emerson going. So that means it looks like they can save money and they don't have to go for them positions in the January transfer window. For me, bringing in Pochettino, what's the point of these last 3 years? It's been a waste of money. It's been a waste of time. And it's been a waste of fans' times as well, because it's an admission of guilt. It's an admission you got it wrong. You should have spat Pochettino after Champions League final, a bit like what Liverpool done with Jurgen Klopp. Okay, well, are we going to blame you for the Champions League final loss? Or are we going to blame that numpty you have in goals? They blamed the numpty they have in goals when they got them a new goalkeeper, a new centre-back, and they went on to win the Champions League the following year and every other cup in world football since then. What? It's just like, why didn't we do that under them Poch then? You look at little bits of. You look at Poch's squad at the time, you could say, okay, bring in a good centre midfielder in here, bring in a decent centre-back to be able to challenge Toby and Jan, and let's go again. But we didn't want to do that. So then if they do bring back Pochettino, it's been an admission of guilt that the last 3 years have been a complete waste of time for absolutely everybody involved in this involved in this football club. At the end of the day, hiring and firing managers is not the answer. The board changing their ways and the way they operate and changing that business model to suit the infrastructure that they brought us and to suit the fans' ambition and to align themselves with Conte's vision as well. The answer is backing the manager and bringing in the players. And at the end of the day, yeah, look, most fans would say they want Pochettino back. Bringing back Pochettino, yeah, he might get us to them occasions again eventually. But for me, he doesn't have the experience or that big game now or the ability to be able to handle it and maybe compose everybody in and around the club going into them games. Whereas, and someone like Antonio Conte has a proven track record of being able to do that. So why wouldn't you do it under him? Why? Just stop hiring and firing managers on your mistakes and actually look at your mistakes, admit them, and come out and put them right. Yeah. We can all move on and have a happy fucking life, an easy life.
It's two kind of sad choices. It's either he keeps going back to what he knows, which are these former Chelsea managers, or he goes back to a pure admission of guilt, like you said, in the case of Pochettino. Flav, thank you very much for coming on today. Sorry that it's the most doom and gloom week as well for you to touch on. Maybe be better circumstances, but it is Tottenham at the end of the day. What can we expect? Yeah, Dave.
No worries.
Just before we let Flav go, I did want to get his thoughts quickly on, basically the board coming out again, Flav, asking for the supporters trust coming out again, asking for the club to come out and give their answers now, not in February. What do you make on the club's stance to basically just stay silent in a period of turmoil where everybody, including Antonio Conte, is looking for a bit of leadership?
Yeah, I agree. It's strange. Look, I can understand why they may not want to comment because during the transfer window, because it could kind of remove leverage in negotiation to say that this is what we're doing, this is how active we're being. But how much difference is it actually going to cause? A big part of this is Daniel Levy's inability to communicate with the fan base. If we knew what the plan was, or what he was thinking, or how he aims to fix these problems, then I think we'd be a little more forgiving of the failings, and saying, look, this is what we're doing, this is our aim. We don't have a clue. All we've got is evidence, the evidence of the past, to suggest that he's not interested in backing whoever manager it is that we have in place, as much as other clubs in this league. And they should answer the questions, because we're fascinated to know what those answers might be, and it would help. And I think the trust have done, they get a lot of stick. A lot of stick in a situation where they have no power, right? The trust, like any other trust of any other club, have zero real zero power. No real power as it stands. So they're doing their best without any weapons to fight with. Yeah. So the fact that they get so much stick off other fans is shameful. Actually, that they're treated in the way that they do, and they continue to work hard on our behalf. But they can't force them to answer these questions. But the public opinion is going to be important to ENIC, because eventually this groundswell of a movement against them will get bigger. So it's just answer the fucking. Sorry, I keep swearing. Just answer the question. Just what harm can it do? Start communicating, build a dialogue with the fans, even if it's through the trust, and just come out and make statements, rather than at the end of the season, we do this, and investment will come in the future, and we've opened an amazing stadium, and we've have this partnership with the NFL. We don't really give a fuck about any of that, really. The stadium's lovely. I prefer the old White Hart Lane. I'd much rather go and watch Spurs in the old White Hart Lane than this one, but it was part of the process, and as fans, we suffered by the building of that stadium, because the investment wasn't there when we could have potentially kicked on. I understand why the stadium was built. It future-proofs us to a certain degree, and it gives us a different a revenue stream that matches other clubs in the league. We know the reasons why the stadium was built, but the return has to be now. Deliver on what was being said, in that it will put us on an even playing field when buying players and being active in the transfer market. Where we are now is we went for 3 years. We lost Pochettino. That fell apart. We had 3 years of just bobbing around in the doldrums, and now we're here. But we've got a nice big stadium.
It feels like actually the response that they gave, or the follow-up statement, despite the criticism that they maybe unduly or undeservingly receive, I felt like this was actually their response, or their follow-up statement. It feels like everybody's actually quite happy with, from what I heard. Even people that I know that have criticized them in the past, the supporters trust, seem quite happy actually with their follow-up statement. So at least it does show that
I was quite interested to the tone of the response to it from the club wasn't dismissive either. It was like, we're going to answer these questions. We want to answer these questions. We just have to wait till the end of the transfer window. Look, now, 13 days from now makes no difference. If they answer them and we get some sort of, at least insight into what's going on behind the closed doors at White Hart Lane, then that's progress. I think it's important for the trust to say, no, we're not. We'll wait. They're strong in their rebuttal and saying, look, this is a problem. We need to know now. But in reality, 13 days from now, we'll have the answers, so it doesn't make much difference. But shout out to the trust and all the work they do.
Fair play to them. Fair play to the trust. I didn't expect them to come out with a follow-up statement to try and put a bit more pressure on the board. But look, at the end of the day, like I said earlier, the reason why they haven't come out and answer them is because they can't answer them. They don't know who the manager is going to be, so they don't know what manager they're going to be investing in the players in. They don't know what manager they're investing. They're buying players for now this January. So on that basis, they can't answer the vision. They can't answer you know, what the plan is going forward, because reality, they don't know. That's why we're sitting here with no answers. It's not good enough. You know, at the end of the day, they need to realise they're custodians of this football club. You know, most fans have supported this football club long before they got here and will long after they go. So, you know, surely it's in everybody's best interest, but also their best interest to have a rapport with the fans, to have communication with the fans, because the happier the fans are, the more money the fans spend on the club and the more money they make. So just come out and just make it an ideal situation for everybody, instead of making this football club a grind to follow. Look, I know I love the grind. I know I love it, to be honest. Yeah, you know, I have to go through it, but at the end of the day, why can't we just start making it easier on everybody involved? Because that's all we want at the end of the day. Just make it a bit easier on the managers, the fans, the playing squad, and yourselves. Just make it a bit easier. But look,
yeah, I mean, what you just said, that you said something there about the custodians of the club. The fact is, though, they're not. They own it. It's theirs. It belongs to them. In our hearts, it belongs to us. But you saw how ENIC viewed their fans, or fans of the club, merely as customers. They changed. You know, remember, they changed the terminology on the membership cards from away from membership, because you're a member. You're not a member of this club. You're a client of the club. There is no membership. A membership would suggest that you have some sort of controlling interest in it, or you're a member of something that you can influence. The fact is, we're client reference numbers, all of us. And that is the makeup, and unfortunately, that is the way football is in the UK. And more unfortunately, the irony of me saying this is that we were a team that did it. We created this situation back in the 80s when Irvine Scholar listed us as a public company. We were in the situation where we took away the ownership from the members, as they were back then, and almost every other team in Europe followed suit. Except in Germany. But anyway, sorry, it's even more depressing than, than the rest of the stuff we've been talking about.
But Flav, thanks for coming on.
It'll be all right, boys. It will be all right. Trust me, we've gone through this. We've been worse. It will be all right. One way or another, it will be fine.
We could have won 4-0, and this would have been an entirely different conversation. It really is how it is. It just changes every week. So.
We're going to the Etihad. We're going to fucking do them over. You watch. 4-0.
Let's hope for it. But I just saw also as well on the Fighting Cock that you have also like a similar, maybe, you know, sort of podcast that has come out as well, you know, with similar topics about, you know, diving over the future and, you know, all the sort of topics as well.
Yeah, go listen.
But thank you very much, Flav. Thank you very much.
It's a pleasure. Look, just and if I'm free, I'm happy to come on whenever you like.
Brilliant.
Appreciate that very much.
Appreciate that. Well, look, everybody, we will be putting the link to Flav's podcast. Look, most of you already know who. I don't want to embarrass the guy. Most of you know exactly what he does and who he is. But for those who don't, I will put the link underneath for his podcast. Please get over there, smash or subscribe on it, give it a listen. I want to say a massive thank you for your time, my man. I really appreciate it.
Absolute pleasure. Absolute pleasure. Cheers.
And we'll definitely be in contact soon again to get you on. Jacko, thank you for getting up extra early this morning as well. Over in America, you know, 5 hours behind, so he's up super early. So Jacko,
the coffee and the yogurt hit well this morning. Yeah, the coffee and the yogurt.
We could have done it later. Next time, I didn't know that you were in the States. We could have done it later. It wouldn't have been a problem.
Just shows how, just like I said, you know, the coffee and the yogurt over here hit very well today. You know, it's the brain power was good. You know, not, you know, working well today. But yeah, everybody, I think, you know, doom and gloom sort of week, doom and gloom podcast, but hopefully we'll be on better circumstances next time around after we smash them at the Etihad. But I think that'll do for now. Everybody, hit that like button on the way out. Everybody, come on, you Spurs. At least for me and Dave and Conte, we trust, and we will be seeing you.